Come closer, dear. This one is about a woman named Eve, 34 years old, drove out to the farmhouse alone and thought nothing of it. The kind of woman who handled things herself. Not stubbornness, not pride. Just a quiet competence that other people tended to mistake for coldness. She was settling an inheritance. That was all it was supposed to be. Her great-uncle's farmhouse on the edge of Harlow Field, left to her in a will she had not expected, from a man she had barely known. A week to sort through his things, decide what to keep, sign what needed signing, and hand the keys to an estate agent by Friday. She did not know why he had left it to her specifically. She would. By the end of the week, she would understand exactly why Edmund Vare had chosen her above everyone else, and she would wish he hadn't. The farmhouse appeared at the end of a road so straight it felt deliberate. Eve had driven 3 hours, and the last 40 minutes had been nothing but flat land. Fields stretching in every direction, brown and harvested and bare. The kind of landscape that made the sky feel very large and everything under it feel very small. The farmhouse sat at the end of the road like something placed there. Old stone, 2 stories. A barn to the left that leaned slightly as if listening. Fields on all sides going to the flat horizon. Eve parked and got out and stood for a moment in the wind. The fields were perfectly still. No birds, no insects. Just the wind moving over the bare brown earth, and the farmhouse standing there and the sky above it going from orange to dark. She got her bags and went inside. She told herself the stillness was just autumn. She told herself that for 3 days. Edmund Vare had been a careful man. His papers were organized. His books were labeled. His kitchen was clean and his tools were hung in order. And everything about the farmhouse spoke of a person who paid close attention to things. Everything except the locks. Every door had them. Every window. Old iron bolts that had been added long after the house was built. Retrofitted, recent. The kind of locks you added when you became afraid of something getting in rather than something getting out. Eve sat at his desk going through his papers. Outside the window, the fields were dark and flat, and the wind had stopped. She found the first strange thing at the bottom of the 3rd drawer, a notebook, old. His handwriting inside, but different from the careful writing on his files. Rushed, uneven, the writing of a man who was frightened. She opened it. The first page said one thing: do not go into the field at night. Do not go into the field at night. Do not go into the field at night. Written 47 times. She counted. In the morning, the field looked wrong. Not dramatically. Not obviously. The wrongness was the kind you had to stand still to see. The kind that revealed itself only when you stopped moving and let your eyes go soft and just look. The soil was raised, in lines, running through the field in long, slow curves, like the tracks of something enormous moving just below the surface. Not furrows. The land had not been plowed. These were pushed up from beneath. Pressure from below, applied slowly over time. Eve crouched at the field's edge and looked at the nearest line. The soil there was dark, darker than the rest. The kind of dark that meant wet, but it had not rained in 4 days. She pressed her fingers to it. The ground moved, just slightly, just once. A slow pulse, like a heartbeat felt through a wall. Eve stood up very quickly and went back inside. She read the notebook cover to cover. Edmund Vare had lived at the farmhouse for 30 years. For the first 20, he had farmed the land the way grandfather before that. Harlow Field had always been good land, good soil, good yield. Then the yield stopped. Not gradually, all at once. One season everything grew and the next season nothing did. The soil was the same, the weather was the same, but nothing that went into Harlow Field came back up. Nothing except the lines. He had started drawing them, page after page of crude maps of the field, tracking the lines as they moved and shifted and changed. Months of observation, years. And his conclusion, written at the back of the notebook in handwriting so small she had to hold the lamp close to read it. It is one thing, one enormous thing. It has been under this field for longer than this house has stood. The field does not belong to us. We have always belonged to it. I have found a way to keep it below, to keep it contained, but it requires someone to maintain it, someone who must stay, someone it has not yet tasted. That is why I'm leaving the house to you, Eve. I'm sorry, I did not know what else to do. She found the system in the barn. Her great-uncle had been meticulous about it. Diagrams on the barn wall showing the perimeter of Harlow Field, and driven into the ground at intervals along that perimeter, iron stakes, 12 of them, each one engraved with the same symbol, worn smooth by weather but still visible, a binding. That was what the notebook called it. The stakes created a boundary, kept the thing below the surface, kept it contained within the field's limits, but the stakes needed maintaining. One had already failed. Eve found it on the north edge of the field, pulled halfway out of the ground, tilted at a wrong angle. The soil around it churned and dark and wet. Something had pushed it from below. She looked at the field in the lamplight. Out in the dark of the field, the soil moved, slowly, a long raised line crossing from one side to the other, unhurried and enormous, like a ship's wake on still water. It knew the stake was loose. It had always known. She drove it back in with a mallet from the barn. She should have waited for morning. She knew that. Standing at the north edge of Harlow Field at 11 at night, with a lantern in one hand and a mallet in the other, was not the decision of a sensible person. But the stake was loose, and the thing below knew it. And waiting until morning felt like a choice she might not get to make. She set the stake, and she swung. The ground reacted immediately. The soil around the stake churned, not exploding upward, not dramatically, just moving the way soil moves when something beneath it is pushing. A slow, terrible pressure from below. The earth rising in a ring around the stake. The wet, dark smell of deep-turned soil flooding the air. Eve swung again and again. The stake went down. The soil settled. The line in the field, the long, slow wake of the thing below, stopped moving. Eve stood there breathing hard for a long time. Then she went inside and sat with all the lights on until dawn. In the morning, she walked the perimeter, all 12 stakes, every one. She carried the notebook with Edmund's diagrams, and she checked each stake against his measurements, depth, angle, the condition of the engraving. 3 were failing. The north one she had already fixed. 2 more on the eastern edge, pushed up by the same slow pressure. The soil around them churned and dark, and the engravings worn almost smooth by something rubbing against them from beneath. As she walked, the lines in the field tracked her. She noticed it on the second circuit, the long, slow curves of raised earth. They moved as she moved, followed her progress along the perimeter. The thing below was aware of her, had been aware of her since she arrived. It was not mindless. That was the worst part of the notebook, and the worst part of standing in the morning light watching the soil move. It was not mindless. It was patient. And it had been waiting a very long time for someone to make a mistake. She fixed the eastern stakes at dusk because she could not wait for morning. She could see the center of the field from where she worked, and what she saw there made her work faster. The soil at the field's center was rising, not in a line, in a mass. A slow, dark bulge, the earth pushing upward and cracking as something enormous pressed against it from below. The boundary was failing. 3 stakes gone or weakened, and the thing below was finding the gap, pressing into it, testing the limit of what remained. Eve drove the stakes in the dark, the mallet, the iron, the symbol she did not understand pressing into soil that pushed back. She got the second one in just as the mass at the field's center reached its peak, a dark mound of churned earth 6 feet high, the soil cracking and falling away from something beneath that was almost at the surface. Then the stake caught, the boundary held, the mound sank, slowly, reluctantly, the soil collapsing back over whatever had been about to come through. The dark mass receded into the earth like something submerging. Eve dropped the mallet. She stood in the dark field, breathing. It had nearly come through. 3 more stakes, and it would have. She read the final pages of the notebook 3 times. Edmund had seen it once, 40 years ago, before he had built the binding, before he had understood what lived below Harlow Field. The night when the soil had given way at the field's center and something had come partially through. His description took 4 pages and still felt insufficient. Vast, the word he used most. Vast and dark and without any feature she would recognize as a face or a limb or any part of a thing she had a name for. Just enormity, just the suggestion of scale. The sense of something so large that the field above it was merely its ceiling, that the farmhouse and the barn and the flat land for miles around sat on top of it, the way a rug sits on top of a floor. And old. Old beyond anything she had a frame for. The binding held it. But the binding needed one thing Edmund had not written clearly until the very last page. It needed a permanent keeper, not a week, not a month. Someone who stayed, who maintained the stakes, who kept the boundary whole for the rest of their life. That was the cost. That was what he had left her. She was still reading when the farmhouse shook, not an earthquake, not the wind, a single deep concussion from below, the kind of impact that travels through soil and stone and floor and up through the soles of your feet and into your chest. Eve went to the door. The field center was open, not a mound this time, an absence. A vast dark hole where the soil had given way, the earth collapsed inward, and from that hole something rose. She could not look at it directly, not because it hurt her eyes, because her mind would not hold the shape of it. Every time she focused on one part of it, the rest slipped out of her vision like something seen in peripheral light. Dark, vast. Moving with the slow, terrible patience of something that had waited a very long time and was in no hurry now that it had finally arrived. It did not come toward her. It simply rose, and it looked at her, somehow without anything she recognized as eyes, and the intelligence behind that look was ancient and cold. and absolutely certain. It knew her name. It had known her name before she arrived. She ran toward it, not away, toward. She had the remaining steaks from the barn bundled under one arm and the mallet in her other hand. And she ran into Harlow Field in the dark, with the creature rising above her, and the soil churning around her feet, and the farmhouse behind her getting smaller. The thing above her moved, not to stop her. It watched, patient, as if her running toward it was something it had already accounted for, already decided it did not matter. Eve drove the first stake. The ground fought back, the soil alive with pressure from below, pushing against the iron, the engraved symbol scraping against something she could not see. She drove it anyway. Then the next one, then the next. Each stake that caught made the creature above her shift, not retreat. Shift, as if it felt the boundary reforming, as if the closing of the net was something it registered without yet believing. Eve drove the last stake. She hit it 3 times, and on the third strike the boundary closed. The creature went down, not all at once. Slowly, the same slow patience it moved with, the same unhurried enormity, the dark mass withdrawn into the earth, the way a tide withdraws from a shore. The breach closed above it. The soil moved back. The field went still. Eve was on her knees at the center of Harlow Field. The mallet was still in her hand. Around her the soil was churned and dark and wet, and the smell of deep earth was everywhere. The farmhouse lights were on in the distance. The sky above was full of stars she had not noticed before. The field was quiet. The lines were gone, just flat bare earth in every direction, still and dark and ordinary looking. Eve looked at her hands. They were shaking. That was fine. She looked at the farmhouse. She looked at the field. She already knew. She made the calls in the morning. Her flat in the city. She called the landlord. Her job. She called her manager. Her sister, who would not understand and to whom she could say nothing true. Her friends. The estate agent she had been planning to hand the keys to by Friday. She sat on the farmhouse steps in the early morning light, and she made each call, and she was calm and clear and gave no explanation that was anywhere near the truth. She was keeping the farmhouse. She was staying. She did not know for how long, because the answer to that was the rest of her life, and that was not something she could say out loud yet. The field stretched before her in the pale morning light, flat, still, the soil undisturbed, the lines gone, 12 iron stakes in the perimeter, holding. For now, Eve looked at the field. The field did not look back. Not yet. Give it a week. She watched the dust come in from the farmhouse window. The fields went from brown to gray to the deep dark of a country night with no streetlights and no neighbors and nothing for miles but flat earth and cold sky. The farmhouse was warm behind her. The locks were all thrown. She had made soup. She had found Edmund's books on the shelf, and she would read them. She would learn everything he had learned, and she would maintain what he had maintained, and she would do it the way he had done it, carefully, quietly, without telling anyone, without asking for help that nobody could give. She was not the person she had been when she arrived. That person had driven down a straight, flat road thinking about estate agents and paperwork and what she would do with the rest of her week. That person was gone. What remained was something quieter and harder and very, very clear about what the field outside required of her. Eve looked at the dark fields. She picked up Edmund's notebook. She turned to the first page. She began again from the beginning. Eve won, in a manner of speaking. She drove it back. She closed the boundary. She did the thing her great uncle spent 30 years doing, and she did it in a single terrible night. But the cost was everything she had been before she arrived. Some victories look very much like losses, dear, when you examine them closely. The farmhouse needed a keeper. Now it has one. I'll be right here when you come back, in my chair, where I always am.